The galaxy didn't really know what to make of humans. They were a relatively new addition to the Galactic Council. Quiet, polite, almost too agreeable. Not particularly large, not especially strong. No claws or venom, no telepathy or bone armor like the Sulkai. What they did have, however, was an unshakable weirdness. That eerie kind of calm you only see in predators just before they strike. But most species chalked it up to Earth's chaotic past. Dozens of wars, collapses, rebuilds, tragedies, and triumphs. Humans were tolerated, respected even, but never feared. That was their mistake. It started when the Grail Dominion sent a scout team to the Outer Rim, looking for a resource-rich system they could quietly strip mine. They weren't looking to start a war, just bend the rules a bit, push the edge. Everyone did it. And when they found an isolated little backwater planet with a primitive human colony, they didn't think twice. 6 Grail dropships descended onto Tarsus 4. The humans there had no military, no weapons visible. Just farms, small towns, a few old spaceports. Children ran in dusty fields, and laughter echoed from broken radios. Easy pickings. So they landed. Commander Drextai of the Grail, battle-hardened and decorated, had done this dozens of times. He didn't even bother deploying shock troopers first. Just a show of force from the air and a broadcast message ordering compliance. No response. So they sent in a few drones to sweep the perimeter. Half didn't return. Then the scout team disappeared. It was supposed to be a silent annexation. Quick, clean, no mess. But Tarsus 4 went dark after that. Not a single transmission, not even distress signals, just static. The Dominion got worried and dispatched a battle cruiser. What they found was wreckage. Grail ships burned in craters. Their command center had been pulled apart, literally, metal bent outward like someone had exploded inside it. Troopers were scattered in pieces across the landscape, some missing heads, others twisted in impossible ways. No energy signatures, no heat trails, no explosives, just death. The humans were gone. Not dead. Gone. Vanished. No bodies, no signs of retreat. Just the occasional bloody handprint on metal and words scratched in broken Graal armor. One word kept showing up. Awakened. The Council tried to bury the incident, pretend it never happened. But whispers spread. Whispers that humans had something locked deep in their DNA, something ancient and terrible. Something even they didn't understand. War memories, battle instincts, muscle memory from 1,000 years of killing each other. All buried, dormant, forgotten, until someone kicked in the door. The next time the Grail tried to make contact with Earth directly, a massive black ship emerged from the human sector. It wasn't in any database. No call signs, no IFF codes. Just sleek obsidian hull and glowing red thrusters. It broadcast one thing. You touched the temple. You woke the gods. And then it fired. The beam cut the Grail cruiser in half. Clean, precise, like a knife through butter. No warning, no conversation, no diplomacy. The Council scrambled. Every species started re-evaluating their treaties with humans. Even the war-hardened Volcari closed their borders, because no one knew what the hell had just been unleashed. And somewhere, in the core of Earth, a hidden AI awakened systems that had slept for centuries. Vaults opened, files decrypted, human names, old bloodlines marked with red. The awakening had begun, and the gods were not happy. They came at night, not from the stars this time, but from beneath Earth itself. Old bunkers, some thought to be relics of wars long past, rumbled to life. Across continents, hidden doors slid open, and machines that hadn't moved in centuries stretched their limbs. Massive humanoid constructs powered by fusion cores. Drones with minds of their own. infantry suits with dried blood still on the inside. And the humans didn't even know. Not yet. Most of them were still asleep, still unaware of what was happening out in the deep dark of space. Earth's official line was silence. No news of the Tarsus incident, no mention of the Grail. The few who knew, the old guards, the buried Black Ops divisions, the last remnants of Project Revenant, they were the ones preparing. Quietly, efficiently, like they'd been waiting for this moment. And they had. See, a long time ago humans had learned something terrible, that peace wasn't a guarantee. It was a break, a lull in the storm. So they hid things. Not just weapons, not just machines. They hid instincts, buried codes inside their DNA, locked entire battle doctrines inside neural backups, created command protocols only accessible if humanity was under existential threat. They were never meant to be opened again. Until Tarsus. In the ruined skies of the former U.S. territories, Commander Aaron Voss stared up at a darkening cloud that wasn't cloud at all. It was a carrier-class sleeper fleet rising out of Lake Superior. The lake drained in hours. Ships that had been built underwater beneath the radar, beneath the knowledge of even Earth's current governments, took to the air. She didn't command them. She didn't have to. They remembered. Voss tapped into her retinal feed, and her screen blinked once. Revenant protocol active. She hadn't heard those words since she was a kid, since her father, one of the last engineers of the old era, warned her that if the protocol ever came back online, it meant the gods were stirring. Gods. That's what he called them. She never believed him until now. Across the planet, those like her were getting the same ping. Old bloodlines, soldiers who'd never served, scientists who'd never published, people with a quiet sense of being different, stronger, smarter, quicker to violence. They'd always assumed it was trauma, genetics, maybe too much caffeine. But it wasn't. It was the war gene. The lock had broken, and the universe was about to learn what it meant when war gods didn't ascend to battle. They remembered it. Back on Tarsus 4, the lone surviving Grail, General Drextai, floated in a stasis pod aboard a scavenger ship. He wasn't dead. Not yet. But his mind was broken. He whispered constantly to himself in the Grail tongue, repeating fragments that barely made sense. They weren't warriors. They were machines. Inside meat. They smiled while they killed us. They smiled. The scavengers didn't know what to make of him. They'd picked up the distress signal weeks after the fighting stopped. Found the general wandering a burned-out crater with his armor torn off, and his claws snapped backward. One of them, a young Vari technician, patched together his translator, hoping to get something useful. Drextai looked right at him and said, in perfect, shaking Terran standard, "Run, before they know you were here. Run, little one. The gods have teeth." The tech froze. And far away, on Earth, in an underground vault beneath what used to be Berlin, a door slammed open, not by command, by instinct. A man stepped out, eyes black as midnight, skin pale from decades in stasis. No rank, no name, just a single marking on his wrist. Sovereign Unit 01, Alpha Human. He looked up at the stars, and he remembered war. The stars looked different to Alpha. He'd seen them once through the cracked window of a burning orbital station, back when space was red with blood and debris. Now they were quiet, distant, unknowing. He stood barefoot on the cold stone floor of the Berlin vault, breathing slowly, like he was waking from a long, violent dream. Lights flickered to life as he moved. Systems still recognizing his DNA, still obeying the ancient hierarchy coded into their circuits. He wasn't the leader of any army. He was the army. Alpha wasn't born in the normal sense. He was built, back when Earth thought it could outcreate extinction, back when humans played with evolution like clay. He was part of the Sovereign Program, humanity's desperate answer to an interstellar extinction threat that never came. Or so they thought. The program was shut down, buried, erased from public records. The Sovereigns were put into deep stasis, sealed in bunkers and locked behind protocols no government dared to test. Too powerful, too unstable, too human. And now Alpha was awake, which meant the seal had been broken. As he stepped into the light, satellite feeds poured into his neural implants. Data flooded his vision. Tarsus destruction logs, emergency pings from Revenant-linked bloodlines, reports of old sleeper tech activating across Earth. And one image, a Grail ship, cleaved in half above Titan. No warning, no survivors. Alpha tilted his head. The war had already started. He stepped outside, into the dead city above. Berlin was quiet, too quiet. Buildings still stood, but the people were gone. Evacuated. Or maybe hiding. It didn't matter. He wasn't looking for them. He was looking for her. Aaron Voss sat on the bridge of the newly reactivated Revenant-class battleship Hellwake. It had no official launch record, no registry. Built in orbit decades ago, cloaked and silenced, it now roared with a hunger it was never supposed to feel again. She'd followed the signals here. Berlin. The final vault. And as she hovered just above the ruins, sensors pinged. A single human life form. Her eyes widened. Alpha. She didn't know what he looked like. No one did. The Sovereign files were locked behind quantum encryptions that even modern Earth couldn't crack. But she felt it. Something about the feed. The vitals. It wasn't just another bloodline. This one led them all. Voss landed hard, deploying drones to form a perimeter. She stepped out herself, against every protocol, heart pounding like a war drum. She found him standing atop a collapsed rooftop, staring up at her ship. He didn't speak right away, just studied her. "You have war in your bones," he said finally. Aaron swallowed. "And you have it in your breath." Alpha smiled. A tiny thing, like someone remembering a song. "You came for me?" "I came to stop this." He stepped toward her, eyes glinting. "You can't. None of us can. The temple is open." Behind them, one of the drones beeped. Inbound transmission, encrypted, human origin but old code. Pre-collapse level. Even Alpha narrowed his eyes. Voss accessed it. The voice on the other end was ragged, desperate. "This is Doctor," Hammond from Site Echo 9. "We've got movement. Multiple vaults are breaking open. One in Alaska, one under the Mariana Trench. And something in Antarctica. Not human, not fully. They're waking up too. They remember us. They're afraid." Voss looked at Alpha. "You know what this means?" He nodded slowly. "They're not afraid of us. They're afraid of what we were. And we're about to show them we still are." Far across the system, on the edge of the Kuiper Belt, a long-forgotten alien observatory blinked to life. Its ancient caretaker species, a withered, passive civilization of data archivists, watched the feeds in horror. "Humanity has reactivated," one whispered, "and they remember the war." The temple door was kicked open. Now the gods were walking. The black site in Antarctica had been silent for nearly 2 centuries. It was never on any map, never part of any country. The ice had swallowed it, preserved it. They said the cold was necessary. Not just for secrecy, but to keep whatever was inside asleep. Not dead, not dismantled, just delayed. But now the ice cracked. Not from the outside, but from within. Massive plates of glacial armor shifted and split. Out of a jagged wound in the earth rose a structure forged of carbon steel and something darker, older. Metal that had no rust. symbols that predated known languages. Lights flickered in cold colors, casting long shadows against the snow. Something was waking. Dr. Hammond, still huddled inside Echo 9's control room, watched the seismic readings spike off the charts. His face was soaked in sweat despite the sub-zero temperatures. They said it was a myth, he muttered to himself, hands shaking over the console. They said Project Eidolon was just Cold War paranoia. It wasn't. Project Eidolon was humanity's greatest mistake, besides creating the Sovereigns. It was older, dirtier, less about building gods and more about copying one. Back during Earth's second collapse, someone had found remnants of something, an alien thing buried deep beneath the ice. Not alive, not exactly dead. It wasn't mechanical, but it wasn't organic either. It wasn't from here. Scientists tried to reverse engineer it, contain it, understand it. But the more they studied it, the more it watched them back. And eventually they stopped digging, locked the whole facility under miles of frozen wasteland, and passed it down as legend. Until now. The power readings spiked again. Doors in the deep cracked open. Something massive stirred in the pit below. Metal clanked. Lights died. And then came the first sound from within the tomb. A single word broadcast into every active revenant frequency. Father. Back on the Hellwake, Alpha went still. Erin looked up from her HUD, heart stuttering. What is that? Alpha's voice turned low. Flat. Something that should never have learned to speak. Thousands of kilometers above, in orbit, the Galactic Observation Station Tara-Nur was under lockdown. The alien species stationed there, observers from the peacekeeping Sarathi Order, had never raised weapons in thousands of years. But when Earth's signals began pulsing, when the word father repeated across systems they'd long labeled dead zones, they armed everything. Because they knew what it meant. The last time that word had echoed through the stars, it had ended a star system. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that humans didn't send the signal. Something imitated them. Erin stared at Alpha. You knew this could happen? I hoped it wouldn't. You hoped? His eyes were dark pools of memory. Before the Sovereigns, before we were perfected, Earth tried something else, something raw, something more alien than human. They called it the prototype. It wasn't a weapon, it was a mirror. Erin's voice dropped. A mirror of what? Of what they feared we'd become. The ground shook again. In Antarctica, the buried vault exploded upward. A column of energy shot into the sky, burning a hole through the atmosphere. Light flared in alien shapes. Snow melted for kilometers. And from the heart of that rising inferno stepped a figure. 9 feet tall, human-shaped, but wrong. Too symmetrical, too smooth. No mouth, no nose, just a blank face with eyes that flickered like black stars. The being looked around at the frozen wasteland, flexed its long, perfect fingers, and then smiled. Not with a face, but with the sky. Above it, clouds twisted. Electricity bloomed in unnatural patterns. Radio towers began screaming, and all across the earth, revenant agents fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Visions, nightmares, flashes of war that had never happened. But might. Erin doubled over, gripping the rail. What is it doing? Alpha was silent. He didn't move. He just stared at the sky. He's remembering, he said quietly. Erin's breath caught. Who? Alpha turned toward her, his voice not quite human. The first god. And from the pit of the earth, a voice thundered in every human's mind. You were made in my image. Now remember who made me. The world didn't end in fire. Not yet. It ended in memory. Across Earth, people dropped mid-step, on sidewalks, in offices, on subway trains. Eyes rolled back, mouths open in silent screams. Their minds flooded with images that didn't belong to them. Wars they hadn't fought, weapons they'd never touched, battles that had never happened. A boy in Nairobi wept as he saw his own hands, aged and scarred, plunge a plasma spear into an alien queen. An old woman in Kyoto collapsed as she relived the orbital siege of a planet named Virelia, where humans had fought until every last starship melted in its own exhaust. And a 6-year-old girl in the new Santiago colonies screamed the names of people no one alive had ever known. Alpha stood at the center of it all, unmoved. The sky above Berlin churned like a storm with a will of its own. It wasn't weather. It was signal, a transmission buried so deep in human consciousness that not even the sovereign program had dared touch it. Voss clutched the railing of the Hellwake, her knuckles white. All around her, officers were on the ground, twitching or crying out. Only a few, those with revenant lineage, were still standing. Barely. "Alpha," she hissed. "What the hell is he doing to us?" "He's not attacking," Alpha said quietly. "He's unlocking." "What?" "Eidolon isn't a weapon. It's a key, a trigger. It was designed to wake us all up." Voss stared at him, stunned. "You knew this?" "I was never supposed to remember," Alpha said. "But I do now. I remember everything." He turned his eyes towards the sky, where the signal crackled and spiraled through satellites, bouncing across jump relays into the far corners of human space. "This isn't war," he whispered. "This is reclamation." Voss's comms lit up again. Fragmented, static, warped. A voice she recognized. Dr. Hammond. "Can't stop it. It's rewriting them, reprogramming. No, listen to me. The prototype wasn't alone. There are others, buried, waiting. It was a seed." The message cut out. A silence heavier than any death followed. Voss swallowed hard. "Alpha, you said he was the first god. What does that make us?" Alpha turned to her. "The children who forgot their father." She felt it then. Not in her head, but in her bones. Like someone knocking from inside her ribcage. A pulse of heat, a command without words. Old memories flickering at the edge of her vision. Not hers, but part of her. She wasn't a soldier. She'd never killed anyone. But her hands remembered how to. In deep orbit, the Council of Zeros held emergency talks. Species from 100 systems shouted across glowing chambers. Threat levels were raised. Protocols for galactic quarantine triggered. The word Earth was now spoken like a curse. One of the Sarathi ambassadors slammed his clawed hand on the table. "This is what we feared. This is why we restricted them. The humans were never civilized. They were asleep. And now they're dreaming again." Another delegate, from the crystalline Vari, trembled visibly. Their dreams burned stars. No one had an answer, only panic, until one voice, old and calm, cut through the noise. The Thren-Gor Elder, oldest of the council. He leaned forward on his bone staff, eyes gray with memory. "We did not survive the last war of the First Flame. We merely watched it pass us by," he said. "If the humans have found the echo, if Eidolon breathes again, then it is not war we face." He stood, slow and deliberate. "It is extinction, and this time, it's theirs to decide." Back on Earth, Alpha walked through the ash and ruin of Berlin toward the signal source. Every step he took, machines rose to meet him, ancient warbots with rusted joints straightening, auto-turrets bowing their barrels like priests. Ahead of him, in a crater of ice and smoke, Eidolon stood, still smiling. It cocked its head as Alpha approached. No sound came from its mouthless face, but Alpha heard it anyway. "I knew you'd wake." Alpha didn't respond with words. He raised his hand. The sky split. Above them, a hole tore open in space, not from tech, but from will. The sovereign fleet, long dormant, shimmered into existence, row after row of black ships, silent, waiting. Alpha spoke at last. Then let the gods finish what they started. The sky over Earth fractured. To most, it looked like a storm, black clouds curving unnaturally, lightning that moved like veins across the atmosphere. But to the few who still remembered what true war looked like, it was a summoning. The kind humanity had sworn never to perform again. Above Berlin, the sovereign fleet descended, each ship a sleek monolith of obsidian and red glow veins, shaped like daggers pointed straight at the heart of the universe. They didn't make noise. They didn't broadcast greetings. They simply arrived, like a memory you never asked for but couldn't forget. On board the Hellwake, Commander Aaron Voss stared in mute awe. Hundreds of ships now hovered in Earth's lower orbit. No government had built them. No registry claimed them. They belonged to no one. And yet every revenant bloodline felt them. Alive. Watching. Waiting. Alpha stood before Eidolon in the center of Berlin's scorched ruin. The city around them was frozen in time, like it knew this moment wasn't meant to be seen. He stared up at the fleet, then back at the silent figure before him. "You've awakened them all," Alpha said. Eidolon's response echoed in his skull, not as words, but emotion. Satisfaction, hunger, pride. "I lit the fire, but you, Sovereign, you are the flame." In the pit where Eidolon had risen, machines stirred, not Earth's, not human. They were smooth, organic in movement, spider-like with long silver limbs. Each of them moved like dancers in a ritual, forming patterns around Eidolon. "Those aren't ours," Voss whispered into comms, watching from orbit. "What are they?" "Hybrids," Alpha replied, over the channel. "Failed children of the first flame. Eidolon tried to replicate itself, with other species." Voss inhaled sharply. "You mean—" "Yes," Alpha said. "Aliens." The truth hit hard. Eidolon hadn't been alone all these years. While Earth slept, it experimented, reaching across the dark void, harvesting minds, testing limits. It wanted a new pantheon, a new family. But nothing matched the chaos of humanity. Eidolon stepped forward now, its voice calm and vast inside Alpha's head. "You were meant to conquer the stars. They tried to silence you, chain you, make you forget. But I remembered." Alpha clenched his fists. Power rippled under his skin like a storm begging to break. "You remembered wrong." And then it moved. Not Eidolon, but Alpha. One blink. And he was across the crater, fist smashing into the prototype's chest with the force of a collapsing building. The hybrid scattered as energy blasted outward in a perfect circle. The earth shook. Ice cracked for miles. Eidolon flew backward, skidding through what remained of Berlin's ancient walls, metal shrieking against stone. But it didn't fall apart. It stood, slow and deliberate, and tilted its head. Good. Above them, the sovereign fleet came to life. Engines flared red. Cannons swiveled. Targeting systems locked onto the hybrids below. The ships didn't wait for orders. They were the orders. From the Hellwake, Voss watched it unfold. "Alpha, if you do this—" "I'm not starting a war," he growled. "I'm finishing a betrayal." And then Earth's sky turned red. Sovereign ships opened fire, not with lasers but with graviton torches, beams of gravity shaped into spears that pierced matter on a molecular level. The hybrids were shredded in seconds. Screams echoed, not from mouths, but from minds. Eidolon dodged easily, dancing through ruin like it had done this before. Alpha followed. They clashed in mid-air, no longer bound to the ground. Two forces meant to end worlds. Alpha moved like a man possessed, like war itself had wrapped itself in human flesh and said, "Try me." Eidolon didn't defend. It learned. With every hit, every strike, it adapted, moved faster, grew smarter. Voss could see it happening. "He's copying you, Alpha. It's learning your patterns." "I know," Alpha said, breathing hard. "That's the point." "Then why are you—" "I'm teaching him how to lose." Deep in space, on the edge of the Orion Rift, alien species began evacuating systems near human borders. No diplomatic envoys, no questions, just silence and flight. The old fear had returned. Not of Earth, of what sleeps inside it. Back on the surface, Eidolon finally spoke aloud. Its voice shook the buildings still standing. "You cannot destroy me. I am your reflection." Alpha's eyes burned. His voice echoed with something older than words. "Then it's time to break the mirror." The mirror shattered. Alpha struck with such force the sound vanished. No thunder, no crash, just silence. Total, complete silence, as his fist connected with the center of Eidolon's chest. The being jerked mid-air, convulsing, its limbs flailing in unnatural directions as invisible shockwaves tore through the atmosphere. Space rippled around them like a cracked lens. Energy pulsed out from the point of impact, racing across Berlin, then Europe, then the world. And Eidolon screamed, not with a voice, not with a mouth. It screamed through every human who carried the war gene. Across the earth, revenant bloodlines howled in agony. Some dropped unconscious, others wept. A few laughed maniacally before their minds snapped back into place. Generations of genetic memory, once dormant, suddenly surged with unbearable heat. Old instincts burning brighter than ever. In orbit, on the bridge of the Hellwake, Aaron Voss gripped the railing, trying to breathe. "Systems are shorting," her lieutenant called out. "Something's scrambling the neural links. We're losing control of the Revenant fleet." Voss turned to her AI command interface. "Override it." "I can't," the AI hissed. "It's not a system failure, it's genetic synchronization. Eidolon is triggering a full cascade." Alpha was right. This wasn't war. This was a reawakening. Below in the storm-lit sky, Alpha and Eidolon clashed again and again. Blurs of motion, trails of energy arcing across the sky like falling stars. Eidolon had stopped mimicking. It was improvising now, striking low, shifting form mid-fight, arms stretching into blades, a second spine extending from its back as it stabbed with cruel precision. Alpha was faster, but not invincible. Eidolon's blades grazed him. Deep gashes tore through his side, glowing briefly before his skin sealed over with nanite-accelerated healing. Blood spilled anyway. Not ordinary blood. War blood. It hit the ground in fat black drops that sizzled and burned craters into the stone. Where it fell, machines awoke. Ancient defense turrets, long rusted, powered up. Drones buried for decades rose on humming grav pads. The Earth was remembering him too. Voss staggered to the comms. "Alpha, you're bleeding." "I'm seeding," he growled through clenched teeth. "This planet was built to recognize us. It's part of the system. It was always part of the system." Above them, the Sovereign fleet began descending, fast. Not for battle, for reinforcement. Drop pods broke atmosphere like meteors. Each one carried a revenant soldier, those few who had survived the awakening with minds intact. Sleeper elites, children of war, bloodlines unbroken. They landed in silence, surrounding the crater where Alpha and Eidolon fought. No commands were given, no orders, they knew. Because now, they remembered too. One stepped forward, a tall, scarred woman with glowing red eyes. She didn't salute. She just spoke one word. "Permission?" Alpha, still locked in battle mid-air, ducked a strike and answered with a voice like cracking steel. "Granted," she leapt. The revenants charged. Eidolon barely turned before the first impact hit. 20 revenants at once, striking with synchronized fury. No weapons, no shields, just raw, brutal martial precision. The being staggered under their weight, its limbs twisting, body glowing with unstable energy as it tried to recalculate. But it was too late. The mirror had cracked, and now the shards were cutting back. Far beyond, in deep space, a cloaked grail listening post picked up the signal spike. One of the technicians turned to their commander, face pale with fear. "Sir, Eidolon's failing. The prototype is losing." The commander stared blankly. "That's not possible." The humans, they're winning." The commander stood slowly. "Then we run, before they remember we exist." And he gave the only order the Graal Dominion had never issued before. "Evacuate. All systems. Abandon observation. Burn everything. Do not leave any trace." Back on Earth, Eidolon screamed again, this time with rage, lashing out with an energy pulse that vaporized 10 revenants instantly. But more replaced them. Dozens, then hundreds. Voss watched from orbit, hands shaking. "They're multiplying." "No," said the AI, voice hushed. "They're returning. The war gene is pulling from deep code, recreating warriors lost in the collapse. These aren't just revenants. These are originals." Eidolon fell to one knee. Alpha descended, surrounded now by a circle of blood-bonded soldiers. "It's over," Alpha said. Eidolon looked up, for the first time unsure. "I gave you power." Alpha's eyes flared. "You gave us chains, and we turned them into blades." Then he stepped forward, fist glowing white-hot with compressed gravity, drawn from the sovereign core above, and struck. The world held its breath. Alpha's fist, wrapped in blazing white gravity, connected with the core of Eidolon's chest. And this time, there was no silence, no delay, no subtle pulse of power. The earth itself cried out. A thunderclap erupted so loud it shattered glass across 3 continents. The impact cracked the bedrock beneath Berlin, creating a chasm that split the city in 2. A wave of pure kinetic force rippled outward, flattening buildings, toppling ancient statues, and ripping trees from their roots. And at the center of it all, Eidolon fell. Not gracefully, not like a god surrendering to fate. It collapsed, its limbs convulsed, the smooth perfection of its body twisted and fractured, black liquid sprayed from the wound in its chest, hissing as it hit the ground. The hybrids, still clinging to their creator like lost children, screeched and folded inward, their forms unraveling into ash. The revenants stood still, forming a perfect ring around the dying being, weapons lowered, breathing heavy. Blood dripped from torn armor and singed skin, but no one spoke. They didn't need to. Alpha stood above Eidolon now, breathing deeply, his chest rising and falling like thunderclouds in a storm. His fists smoked with raw energy, his eyes glowed brighter than ever, twin coals pulled from the center of a dying star. Eidolon raised a trembling hand, fingers twitching like a marionette in its final dance. "Why? Did you stop dreaming?" Alpha knelt beside it. "I didn't," he whispered. "You turned our dreams into nightmares." Eidolon's body began to dissolve, its perfect structure breaking down into streams of light and data. Its final words came not in speech, but a single echo that brushed through every revenant's mind like a dying breeze. "We could have ruled together." Alpha didn't answer. He just closed his eyes. And when he opened them again, Eidolon was gone. Not dead in the traditional sense, unwritten, erased from the system that once gave it form. The echoes in the sky faded. The churning storm above Earth finally stilled. Peace, at last. But it wasn't quiet. Because across the globe, the awakening hadn't stopped. It had only begun. In orbit, the Hellwake's systems slowly recovered. Erin Voss slumped into her chair, sweat coating her skin. Casualty report? She asked. The AI responded, voice calm again. 72% of activated revenants survived. 17% lost to neural overload. 11% missing. Status unknown. Unknown? They changed. Too much. Left the gene spectrum entirely. Possibly ascended. Voss exhaled. And Alpha? Alive? The AI replied. But not the same. Alpha stood at the edge of the crater, watching the sunrise break through ash and ruin. The revenants behind him were silent, their faces caught somewhere between awe and fear. They had followed him into death, and he had pulled them back out. Voss arrived minutes later, dropping from an orbital shuttle. Her boots crunched in the shattered stone as she approached. You okay? She asked. Alpha turned to her. Something in his gaze was no longer entirely human. No, he said, but neither is the world. She looked around at the destruction. What happens now? Alpha was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke with the gravity of history behind his words. Now we rebuild, but not the way we did before. No more lies, no more erasing what we are. We were made for war, but we choose what we do with that. Voss nodded slowly. And the galaxy? Alpha's eyes flickered towards the stars. They heard us. They felt us. Some will flee, others will come. But this time, when they knock, he clenched his fist. We answer as gods. In the outer reaches of space, transmissions from Earth echoed through thousands of light years. Worlds that once looked down on humanity now trembled. Treaties were rewritten, empires reconsidered expansion, and somewhere deep in uncharted space, a child born of a forgotten race woke screaming. He dreamed of a man with burning eyes, a man who broke the sky with his hands. Earth was no longer just a world. It was a warning. The temple had been kicked open, and inside, the gods had remembered who they were. The war wasn't coming. It had already been won by the ones who forgot they were gods and chose to remember.